Welcome back to Selling on Giants. This is the show where we break down what is actually happening across Amazon, Walmart, and e-commerce, and more importantly, what it means when you are responsible for the P&L and every decision shows up in performance. This week is not about one major headline. It is about a pattern that is getting harder to ignore. Platforms are not just competing for transactions anymore. They are competing to own the infrastructure behind how e-commerce runs, and that shift changes how you operate whether you realize it or not. Let's start with Amazon because this is where it becomes very clear. Amazon just expanded its multi-channel fulfillment Shopify app into Europe, Japan, and Canada. And while this looks like a feature release on the surface, it is really a strategic move to become the backend for direct-to-consumer operations. You can now run Shopify orders through Amazon's fulfillment network across multiple regions using the same inventory pool, which removes a major operational friction point for brands managing multiple systems. The upside is obvious because you get efficiency, simplified logistics, and faster scaling without needing to build out additional infrastructure. The trade-off is just as important. The more your business runs through Amazon's infrastructure, the more dependent you become on it. And once fulfillment, inventory, and logistics are centralized in one system, switching becomes harder, flexibility decreases, and your business starts to move with the platform whether you want it to or not. Now layer that with something that seems unrelated but actually points in the same direction. VAT compliance for EU expansion continues to be reinforced, and this is where a lot of brands underestimate what global growth actually requires. Selling into Europe is not just turning on listings, it is registering across countries, managing ongoing filings, handling different tax rates, and dealing with cash flow timing between collecting VAT and remitting it. That means expansion is not just a strategic decision. It becomes an operational commitment with real impact on margins, overhead, and execution speed. And this reinforces the same pattern where growth is still available, but the cost and complexity of accessing it continues to increase. Now bring this back to something much closer to daily operations, which is A to Z claims. Amazon continues to promote buy shipping as a protection layer, and on paper, the system makes sense because you use buy shipping, ship on time, provide proof of delivery, and respond within the required window. In practice, sellers are still seeing claims go through even when all of those conditions are met, which means protection exists, but activation is inconsistent, and that creates a shift in how you operate. You are no longer just managing customer service. You are managing risk through documentation, response timing, and pattern tracking because relying on appeals after the fact is not working consistently. This reinforces a broader trend where risk is shifting toward the seller, and the response is not to argue with the system, but to build processes that minimize exposure. Now step back from Amazon and look at what is happening globally with supply chains. China is introducing new rules to discourage foreign businesses from relocating production, which adds friction to a trend that has already been underway for years. Brands have been trying to diversify supply chains to reduce dependency and increase flexibility. And now that process becomes slower and more complex because it is no longer just a sourcing decision, it becomes a regulatory one. At the same time, distribution itself is evolving. Speed and reliability are no longer differentiators. They are expectations. And fulfillment networks are becoming more automated and optimized to meet those expectations. The brands that cannot keep up operationally feel it first in conversion because customers experience it through delivery performance and availability, not through back-end complexity. This is where everything starts to stack. Fulfillment complexity, compliance overhead, platform dependency, and rising customer expectations all converge. And this is where most brands begin to feel stretched because the number of variables increases faster than their ability to manage them. This is also where we approach things differently at Bellavix. Instead of trying to optimize everything at once, we focus on identifying where the constraint is forming in the business, whether that is margin pressure, fulfillment efficiency, visibility, or conversion. Because once that constraint is clear, the path forward becomes much more actionable. Bellavix has helped brands generate over $500 million on Amazon, and the consistent pattern is not doing more work, it is prioritizing better and executing more cleanly. If things feel heavier than they should or slower than they used to, that is usually a signal that structure has not kept pace with scale, and that is where clarity makes the difference. You can learn more at bellavix.com. Now let's shift into behavior, because the customer side is evolving just as quickly as the platforms. Millennials and Gen Z are increasingly using AI tools to assist with shopping decisions, which means discovery is becoming guided rather than purely search-driven. Customers are relying less on browsing and more on recommendations, which changes how products are surfaced and how decisions are made. At the same time, AI-driven traffic is increasing, but the quality is inconsistent. More visitors are coming through these channels, but intent varies widely, which means conversion is not reliable enough to treat it as a primary acquisition channel. This is additive traffic, not foundational, and it requires careful monitoring rather than aggressive investment. This also ties into a broader issue around expectations. AI adoption is increasing, but results are not always aligning with the level of hype, and that is creating tension between brands and agencies because performance still comes down to execution, not tools. The systems can help, but they do not replace strategy, positioning, or decision-making. Now bring this back into Amazon again, because they are tightening advertiser payment structures, which reduces flexibility and ties ad spend more directly to cash flow. This matters because it forces more discipline in how campaigns are managed, and inefficient spend becomes more visible and more costly faster. Then you look at Walmart, where they are piloting store-based fulfillment for marketplace orders. This turns physical locations into logistics nodes, which improves delivery speed and reduces last-mile costs, effectively raising the baseline expectation for fulfillment across the board. At the same time, Sam's Club is expanding its retail experience network to connect in-store engagement with measurable data, which means offline behavior is becoming part of the same measurement system as e-commerce. Retailers are gaining more visibility into customer interaction, which increases their control over how performance is evaluated and optimized. Now zoom out to the market level. Retail is growing, but it is not growing evenly. Some categories are performing strongly while others are flat or declining, which means relying on macro growth signals is not enough. You need to understand category-specific dynamics and align inventory, pricing, and advertising accordingly. Finally, look at marketplace strategy overall. Brands are expanding into multiple platforms to reduce dependency on any single channel, but that introduces operational complexity across inventory, pricing, content, and fulfillment. The brands that can manage that complexity effectively are the ones that scale and the ones that cannot eventually hit a ceiling. When you connect all of these signals, the pattern becomes very clear. Amazon is expanding into infrastructure, Walmart is expanding into fulfillment, retailers are expanding into data ownership, AI is expanding into discovery, and governments are expanding into regulation. The environment is becoming more complex from every direction, and the edge is not in hacks, it is in execution, clean data, clear systems, and fast decisions. That is what holds up, that is what scales, and that is what wins. If this episode helped you connect a few more dots, share it with someone on your team or another operator who is working through the same challenges. And if you have not already, leave a review so more brands can find the show and stay ahead of what is actually changing. Mr. Will here, signing off from Selling on Giants. Let's keep building.